Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody, and welcome back to Change of Heart. You know, sometimes we are tricked into living under the assumption or the assertion that there are just good people in this world and bad people in this world, and very rarely does anyone make that jump from being bad to being good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just created some people pious, and He created me, and I'm just not a good person, or I struggle. And this belief is something that shaitan wants us to feel. And then we end up losing hope in ourselves and kind of living a life of disappointment spiritually. When I was preparing for this series, I came across so many different stories of so many remarkable people that if you heard their name or what they accomplished, you would be like, wow, they're like the most pious person, they're like incredible. And then if you heard their origin story or where they came from, their background, their context, their change of heart moment, you'd be shocked. You would never put those two together. Today is a story about a scholar named Abdullah bin Maslama al-Qa'nabi, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, who his name you probably have not heard, but he is one of the teachers of Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, whose name you probably have heard, as well as Imam Muslim, another scholar of hadith. So Imam al-Qa'nabi was a very well-known, reputable muhaddith, a scholar of the tradition of hadith, and a teacher, and one of the students of Imam Malik, rahimahullah. And his story, now you look at his accomplishments, his accolades, you're like, this person was probably like memorizing Quran straight out of his mother's womb. Like he probably came out the womb hafiz. Like they probably, he was probably an incredibly pious person from day one. To be a teacher of Imam Bukhari, to be a student of Imam Malik, to be, wow, that's amazing. But then you look and you see the story of his origin, his context. Somebody asked him, how did you become this way? And he actually says that he was an alcoholic. He was somebody that struggled with alcohol, with drinking wine. And he used to get together with his friends, and they used to do very immoral and unwholesome things and drink a lot and make bad decisions. And so he says that one day I was sitting outside of my home and I was drinking wine, and I was waiting for my friends, and I had the bottle of wine with me. And all of a sudden I saw this man riding on a horse, on an animal. And I saw a lot of people crowded around him. So it looked like it was a big deal. So I grabbed one of the people who was crowded around him and I said, what's going on? Who is this person? And the person looked shocked, stunned that like I didn't know who this person was. And so they said, this is Imam al-Sha'bi, who was another scholar of hadith. And so al-Qa'nabi, he says, who's that? And he goes, he's a scholar of hadith. And he goes, what's a scholar of hadith? And he goes, he's a scholar that teaches the statements and the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. Teaches his sunnah and his hadith, his statements and his teachings. And so al-Qa'nabi becomes intrigued. So he goes up to al-Sha'bi and he has got his bottle of wine and he says, so you teach hadith? And he goes, yes. And he goes, okay, why don't you teach me one right now? Just kind of very shameless, just kind of walking up to him with no formality, no greeting, nothing, just very shameless, and walks up to him. So Imam al-Sha'bi, he looks at him and he kind of reads the situation and kind of figures out, okay, this guy, something's not 100% on the up and up. Like he's got a bottle of wine, he's coming up to me, he's kind of got this attitude, probably looks like he's making some bad decisions. And so he says, okay, I can give you a hadith. And so he narrates a hadith and he says that حدثنا أبو مسعود, he says عقبة قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن مما أدرك الناس من كلام النبوة إذا لم تستحي فافعل ما شئت. This hadith is very powerful. That the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم said on the authority of Abu Mas'ud, Uqba, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said that one of the teachings that has been universal, that all prophets have had and have given to their people. This is something that, every religion, every religious tradition has some differences, but one thing that's been the same, the Prophet ﷺ was saying, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي, if you don't have any shame, if you can't find it within yourself to be shy or modest before Allah, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي, or before people, anybody, فَفَعَلْ مَا شِئْتَ, then I guess you're just going to do whatever you want. Go ahead. It's such a heavy hadith, subhanAllah, when you think about it. And al-Qa'nabi, he feels its weight. And he hears this and he wonders to himself, is this me? These words are the words of the Prophet ﷺ? And Ash-Sha'bi says yes. And so he goes into his home and he begins to cry because he wonders, I've been living my life doing whatever I wanted. Is it true that I'm somebody who doesn't have any humility, no modesty, no shameful, shy presence before my Lord? Who am I? What have I become? And so he actually dumps out all of his wine and he tells the people of his home that when my friends come, invite them in and feed them, but let them know that what happened to me and let them know that I've gone. And so from there he decides to go and study hadith, and he travels all throughout his region in Iraq, and then eventually he makes his way over to Medina and he studies hadith with Imam Malik rahimahullah, and eventually becomes one of the great teachers of hadith, of the great scholars of hadith, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim rahimahullah. A very interesting story. And one thing that I'll highlight here that I think is so profound is that how many years and how many days and how many moments have gone by in our lives where we've heard a verse or a hadith that was so powerful but it didn't change us. Like we heard an ayah, we heard a verse of the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and there was so much weight in it, but it didn't affect us, it didn't impact us. And the reason why was because we didn't let it in. Qa'nabi was at the position where for some reason when Imam Sha'bi he said this, and this hadith it fit him, the shoe fit, he let it in and it completely transformed who he was. Amassing more information, reading more and learning more is good, but it's only as good as the amount that it changes a person. So the next time you hear something from the Quran or from the hadith literature, instead of trying to get more or quickly roll past it or favorite it and move on, do what Imam al-Qa'nabi did and think for a moment about how that narration applies to you, how that verse applies to you. And perhaps maybe we'll all be able to have that moment, that change of heart that he did when he heard the words of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. May Allah ta'ala give us that humility and that shyness that we need. And may Allah ta'ala protect us from being people that the Prophet ﷺ described here, فَفَعَلْ مَا شِئْتَ, that they'll just do whatever they want because they don't have any humility before their Lord. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Barakallahu feekum, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.